is he led that campaign to keep Scotland in the Union. There's a very, very famous debate that I can remember, the first one against Alex Salmond during that campaign. And actually the expectations were that Salmond, being such a good debater, might wipe the floor with him.
Yeah.
And do you know what? Alistair Darling won it. And it changed the complexion of that debate for quite a few weeks in the run-up to the end of it. He was a great constant figure in the years before that in Scottish politics. I first heard of Alistair Darling when he was president of the Students' Union in Aberdeen in the 1970s. He had black hair then and a black beard. He was a sort of lefty law student. He then became, and rose to a wee bit of prominence, certainly in the Scottish context, prominent in a big revolt in Lothian Regional Council, where he was a councillor in the early 1980s. They were revolting against cuts in the rate support grant. After that, he was elected to Parliament in 1987. And as you rightly say, John, he joined that First Labour cabinet in 1997, full of Scots and talented Scots. Gordon Brown, Robin Cook, Gavin Strang, all of those people, Donald Dewar, all of those people. And Alistair Darling was there as the Shadow Chief Secretary to the Treasury, Gordon Brown's right-hand man, and had to do a lot of the tough stuff even then.
Yeah, I mean, all the tributes that we've heard today, and we've heard many, many of them, they touch on, one after another, with the character of Alistair Darling as a gentleman and a gentleman, a man with a sense of humour. And that was a constant personal characteristic of Alistair Darling, even through some pretty turbulent times.
It's that calmness that people talk about. He was, I think most of that came to the fore during the great financial crash. People talked about him being the calm person in the room who took everything in, even presented with great calamity. A very, very famous meeting when he was in Europe. He was called out. The Royal Bank of Scotland was about to run out of cash. He thought he had a couple of days to deal with it, and told that the bank would run out of cash in a couple of hours' time. So he went off and he sorted it, and that's what he did. A great sense of calm. He later became a fount of great advice and wisdom for a lot of people. You mentioned his dry sense of humour. And the other big thing, of course, in Scotland that he's remembered for is he led that campaign to keep Scotland in the Union. There's a very, very famous debate that I can remember, the first one against Alex Salmond during that campaign. And actually the expectations were that Salmond, being such a good debater, might wipe the floor with him. And do you know what? Alistair Darling won it. And it changed the complexion of that debate for quite a few weeks in the run-up to the end of it.
That's an interesting memory. I mean, it's fair to say, John, isn't it, that he lived during these high peaks of his political time, during the financial crash and then during the independent Scotland fight, in the shadow of Gordon Brown. I mean, Gordon Brown was Prime Minister during the crash and certainly claimed a great deal of credit for being the architect and the driving force for all of that, although Alistair Darling was very busy at the Treasury. And during that independence campaign, the referendum campaign, he led that campaign. But Gordon Brown was there in Scotland right over his shoulder a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, quite an interesting relationship between the two of them, as you say. I think for many, many years, people underrated Alistair Darling compared to Gordon Brown, but he came to the fore and he sparkled during that financial crisis. I think later they maybe had a bit of a fallout, but, you know, a double act that lived not very, very far away from each other, one on one side of the River Forth in Fife and the other one in Edinburgh on this side. Look, the other thing that's worth saying about Alistair Darling, he was a very private man, a family man, and I was looking there just about his title in the House of Lords, Lord Darling of Rulanish in the Western Isles. He used to disappear up to the Western Isles where he could go for some quiet time with his family.
John, it's really good to get your thoughts and your memories on Alistair Darling. John Boothman there of the Times and the Sunday Times.